All right, everybody. So here we are for episode 112 of Now Showing with Mike and Wayne. We have a special guest with us today, Jeff Caetano, who Wayne now works with again, and I used to work with at Felt. Jeff, you are a big Back to the Future fan, which is why we brought you on today. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right. So as I mentioned, Back to the Future, our movie that we're reviewing this week, Meet Cute, is I don't necessarily call it a rom-com, but it is kind of a time travel rom-com. It's got some drama and some serious
romantic dramedy is more.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a lot darker than I thought it was going to be.
Like seriously, I was in the mood to laugh and giggle at this and make Big Bang references every time Penny's on the screen. Yep. But it made me sad. I was like, "What the hell?" But all right, we'll get into that later on.
Yeah, yes. We will move towards that, but we're going to start off. We're just talking Back to the Future today. We'll make some more time travel recommendations later. But we wanted to kind of start with the one that, for our generation, where it started. We're a little too young for the time machine from the 1960s. So this is kind of what we all remember. Back to the Future came out in 1985, produced by Steven Spielberg, directed by Robert Zemeckis, and written by Zemeckis and Bob Gale, starring Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, Leah Thompson, Crispin Glover, Thomas F. Wilson as well. It was originally supposed to star Eric Stoltz. I'm sure everybody kind of knows that at this point in time. They shot actually some of the movie with Eric Stoltz, and it just wasn't. They weren't getting the comic timing. I think he had the chemistry with everybody, but it was just the timing that was a bit off. So they recast. They brought in young star Michael J. Fox from Family Ties, and the rest is history. I mean, you basically have a trilogy that I would argue all the movies are actually very entertaining and pretty well done. And we'll get into the time they spent into crafting 2 and 3. But let's start with the first one. So Jeff, we'll start with you. What was kind of what drew you to this franchise? What do you remember like most about this franchise in the beginning, about Back to the Future specifically?
So it's one of those movies growing up. It was just always on TV, and it still is, right? Like, it was just always on cable. It was kind of like Shawshank, right? It was just always on. And when it's on, you just like have to stop and watch, right? So with that being said, I don't remember the first time that I ever watched it. It just kind of like is in my life, but I do specifically remember having, even though the first one, is probably the best, but I specifically remember having the third one recorded on VHS from TV. I didn't buy it. I had it recorded from TV. Like I remember the commercial breaks, like where they are in the VHS in the movie. But I would watch that. So I've probably honestly watched the third one the most, even though the first one's probably the best. But
yeah,
I love the third one. So.
Yeah, it's great. They're all great. They're all great for different reasons. Obviously, the first one's probably the most complete, and that makes sense because they weren't originally planning on it being 3, right? So, like, they wanted to create this one cohesive beginning to end story, which I think they did really well. But also, 1 and 3, I feel like are more charming than the second one because it's like looking in the past. So you look back more fondly, where the second one going into the future, it was like kind of weird. They had to like predict the future, and also like it was kind of like had kind of not a negative like bent towards it, but like I don't know. I just think the first and third one are much more charming, but I do love the second one in just the idea of like revisiting the first movie from a different angle, like. I don't know if that's like in 1980, that was probably like 88 or something.
89,
like
85, 89, and 90.
Right. So who knows? Like, I'm sure we could go back and find out, but like, I don't know if anybody's even ever tried to do that, to like be very meta and like go within their own first movie.
Well, I mean, I think the closest we probably got to it is recently in 2019 with Endgame. I think
right.
Endgame did a good job of going in and recreating moments from the original film. Of course, they added new scenes and stuff too. but I think definitely inspiration was taken from Back to the Future. I have to believe
Right.
the Russos.
Yeah, they even make there's a joke in there too.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I remember when we were watching it. Like, you gonna sit here and take that, Jeff?
I know. Hey, man.
Back to the Future was bullshit.
I know.
Yeah. So I think this franchise too has just inspired so many other movies.
For sure.
And I think a lot of the time travel movies we'll recommend later kind of come from this idea. And I think you guys you're talking about, like, to me, and it's funny, and maybe because the second one is darker, I always trend that way. To me, the second one has always been my favorite. And right. I agree with you. I'll tell you, the first one is probably the most complete film. And like you said, the idea when they made the first one was that was it. And when they made the second one, and I didn't even realize this till I rewatched the second one, it ends with a trailer for part 3 because they made them together. And I just didn't remember. It had been so long.
They shot them back to back. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So they already, and it was coming out, like, this came out in 2 came out in November, and then 3 came out in the summer of 90. So they were like 6-7 months apart. So I thought that was interesting. And what I liked about, and we're just kind of jumping around here, people, so sorry we didn't stick to the first one directly, but
we'll get back to it.
Yeah, exactly. What I liked about the second one is noticing all the little things that they built in to set up the third one. So you see, like, you see the Old West stuff, you see certain things that I thought it made more sense when I realized they filmed them back to back. I'm like, well, obviously it was fucking easy to do that when you're making both movies, but it's still, they were very meticulous on making sure everything connected and that nothing seemed off. And
yeah, the whole series does a really good job of foreshadowing and just like place, like, for instance, the opening scene to the first one, right? Like panning through Doc's lab, all the little Easter eggs, right? Like foreshadowing certain moments. There's just stuff throughout the entire series that they do that and do it really well.
Yes, I think the plutonium is one of the things I think you're talking about too. And in the opening scene where you see Doc's lab, there's the TV talking about the plutonium that was stolen, and then it's sitting right on his floor.
The guy hanging from the clock.
Yep, exactly. There's so many things that they did such a good job of tying together. It's really hard to pick apart, like, aside from saying that the butterfly effect type thing is bullshit, like Avenger said. Other than that, like, there's really, and that's just more of an opinion, really, when you think about it. Other than that, they really spent so much time putting it together. I do have one gripe with, and it was just one thing that kind of bugged me, and it kind of maybe goes back to the ancestral stuff that we get in part 1, where he almost, has sex with his mother.
Well, you know what Freud says about all that.
Yeah, right, exactly. Welcome to my TED Talk. So I think I know why they did what they did, but so in part 3, they get Leah Thompson as the mother in the Old West. Okay, so like his relative.
Yeah, it'd be his great aunt or something.
But so what they're implying is actually ancestral in itself, because Marty looks like Marty, and they're the McFlys, which is his dad. So they're implying that a McFly had already gotten together with whatever his, Lorraine's bloodline, and so then they get together again. So basically, it's implying that they're cousins when they get together in Back to the Future Part 1. You know what I'm saying? Like the reason
it was a small town and it got cold at night.
Yeah, man, it was like a town of like 30 people. Come on, man.
I know, right? Exactly. That's what it seems like. And Flea was one of them. I don't think it was intentional. I think it was only because, as many people may know this by now, Crispin Glover is not in part 2. It may seem like he is. They got their asses sued off for making an actor appear to be Crispin Glover, and he sued them for using his likeness. Now, so they couldn't use him for the third movie, obviously, because there was bad blood there. So they wanted to have Leah Thompson, but it's the one thing I'm watching it throws this wrench in there. I'm like, wait a minute, are they implying that they're related? But I know it was just so that they could get Leah Thompson into the movie. Yeah, I know that was the only
logistical nightmare.
Speaking of Flea, I didn't know that Billy Zane was one of the goons in the first movie.
Oh, dude, this was his first movie. This launched Billy Zane's career.
Yeah,
I was today years old
as Match. His name is Match.
I don't even remember him in part 1 as much, and I just watch it because he's not as visible, but you see him in part 2 quite often because he's with Biff in 1985, and then he's with him again. You see him at the end there.
I don't think he had a line in the first one.
I think it was more like an extra role in the first.
Yeah, he was one of the goons. Like, he was in the car when it got hit with the manure.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I didn't... Rewatching the first one, I didn't even recognize him this time, but the second one, it's one of those treats that when you see Billy Zane walk on screen, like, oh yeah, Billy Zane's in this movie. Like,
he's got that great line in the second one too, like, how did he change his clothes so fast?
And he's got hair, which is something that it was not very common with Billy Zane, except for this and like Titanic, and Tombstone, I guess. But I guess I grew to love him from Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight, where he was bald, and that's just kind of how I remember him, I guess.
Zoolander, of course.
I was going to say, and Zoolander. It's a walk-off. It's a walk-off. One of the greatest lines in cinema history.
Oh, here are some other things that I picked up for the first time.
Sure.
Rewatching the movie this week. Mm-hmm. In the opening scene when Biff totals the car and he gets towed back to the McFly house in the rundown Lion Estate, and it's like, if I type, I got to retype my reports that you give me, because if I turn it into my handwriting, I'm going to get fired. I'm like, wait, type, handwriting? Hang on. And then he goes to the fridge. He's like, I bring your car back and all you got for me is light beer, when there's cans of Budweiser sitting in the door. It's like, hey, wait a minute. Those little gaffes that
Can we talk about Biff for a second?
Yes.
Is Biff the best bully/bully name ever in movie history?
Of course. It's one of the greatest bully names. Thomas F. Wilson is fantastic in these movies. I love that they keep bringing him back as Mad Dog too. Just so good and underrated. And it's funny too, like in his later life, he decided to be like a stand-up comedian. He wasn't really one for most of his career until now. Right. But he was really funny. He was a great, like, kind of character actor. I would have to imagine as an actor, it had to be fantastic to do one of these movies, because almost every time he's on screen, or on screen rather, he's doing something different. You know what I mean?
The second one, when he's actually bullying himself.
Yeah. Oh my God. So
I'm an idiot when you say it wrong. Make like a treat and leave.
Have you guys ever seen the when he was doing stand up, he has like a song that he wrote?
Yes. The Back to the Future.
Yeah. To like answer all the like common questions.
Yes.
It's so good.
I love that he worked it into his act. I thought that was
Yeah.
So going back to the first movie, I think, it's obviously there's the, one thing that happens with movies over the years is they're going to get looked back through different colored glasses. A lot of movies from the 80s are being criticized, for homophobia, for racism. I think rewatching these, like, with the exception of the ancestral stuff, which is only like played as a joke and obviously not played for like a real, you know what I mean? Like, it's it's not supposed to happen, that type of thing. There really isn't much of that in here. So it's also nice to see a movie from 1985 that you could watch today and not feel like, oh, well, you shouldn't have said that, or you shouldn't have said this, or like, I can't believe that. You know what I mean?
I actually rewatched last week, and it was on TV, Revenge of the Nerds.
Oh God.
Problematic, to say the least.
You mean because a hero has sex with a woman without her consent? That
or them setting up cameras in the sorority house and just like watching it on loop.
Mm-hmm.
Tough. Yeah.
And as much as I love it, Bill and Ted, which is another time travel movie, they say the word gay derogatory, or actually the F word, to mean that quite a bit throughout that movie, and you're just like everything else is great, and every time they say it, you're like, huh.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always tough to look back on that kind of stuff.
It is. And the important thing is to learn, I think, from it too. And I don't want anyone to think that, like, I can still watch these movies. It's just, I wanted to make that point because a lot of these movies have that issue, and this one didn't really have that problem.
Yeah, the incest stuff, they walk a fine line, and I feel like they do it pretty well. And it's funny because, so my wife and I, we just had a baby. She just turned 6 months yesterday. And we bought one of those like children's novelized versions of Back to the Future. So I read through it, and the way they like wrote it for kids, I was like, I don't know, this kind of makes more sense. And it's kind of like, it's kind of like, it glosses way over
Yeah.
the like Marty and Lorraine stuff. And it
Yeah.
does a really good job of like making it just like a little tidier and a little like, honestly makes a little more sense. I'm kind of like, maybe they should have went this route.
And
But
glossing over the George McFly's A Peeping Tom.
yeah, oh yeah, no, that's not in it. But
Mhm.
believe it or not, that part is not in the book. But I think a big part of, like you were saying with the movies back then, I think, a large part of them getting the movie made, the studios were pushing back and not being like raunchy enough, right? So
Yeah.
movies like Revenge of the Nerds and Animal House and all them, I feel, and I could be wrong, but I feel like the incest stuff might be their answer to that, and like having a little bit of that in the
I think I think you're right. I think it was
walking this fine edge,
Yes, I think it is definitely one of those things. I would compare it to and it's not a time travel movie, but a movie that kids are starting to discover today and not understanding it, is Tropic Thunder.
Mm-hmm.
And you see Robert Downey Jr. in the blackface. You see a photo of that, and you're like, "What the fuck were they doing in 2008? Why is this a thing?" But if you watch the movie
in context,
with the context, it's the whole point of it is making fun of actors that go to that length to portray those type of characters that don't belong to their culture, and that's the whole point of the movie. And it's same with Back to the Future, like you said. Like, I think you're right. They were making a statement on the Animal House. I mean, in Animal House, the one dude sleeps with like a 13-year-old girl. I mean, so I think they're making these little. They're trying to be better than those movies and kind of poke fun at them. And I think too, what's nice is that when you get the 1955 stuff, so you got the Peeping Tom thing, Marty is pretty disgusted by that when he finds out that that's what his dad is doing. You've got the incest thing, which Marty, again, very disgusted that his mom's trying to make out with him. Not into it. And then you have the racism part with Biff's bullies when they're talking to the band, and like they get put in their place very quickly. Mm-hmm. And the fact that Marty is very cool with them and there's no tension there. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, so I think they did a good job of trying to address those things that you would normally that you saw a lot still in the 70s and 80s films. They still dealt with a lot of racism. I mean, racist caricatures of people, the fucking, the one with the long duck dong, or whatever the fuck that stupid movie is, 16 Candles. Right? Yeah. So like,
right.
That was like around the same time that this movie came out. I mean, so I mean, they were still doing that then. So I think it was smart that they were able to kind of poke fun at, like, hey, you could do this shit without fucking being offensive. And that was, I think, a good thing that they did. And like I said, I think with Back to the Future, if the people that were upset about, they actually go back and watch the movie, they could see that it's not like they were not like promoting incest, it was just one of those things that it was just part of the storyline. And it's even to the point where, remember, the first one when she kisses him and she's like, oh, that just felt weird. Felt like I was kissing a family member. Like that was what they were doing. And I thought that was very clever, and how they worked it. And just, again, it's just watching these movies and knowing Zemeckis now, having watched tons of his movies over the years, how meticulous he is. And I'm actually just listening to a podcast. That's a story podcast. I don't usually listen to those, but it's about the making of Tales from the Crypt's Bordello of Blood with Dennis Miller. And it's called How Not to Make a Movie. And what's hilarious is it's Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale. It was a script that they sold to Joel Silver to Universal, that they wrote in college. So it's the first thing they ever wrote together. It was shit. He knew it was shit, but he's like, they wanted to keep him, and he goes, okay, buy my script and I'll stay. And so because they spent $500,000 on it, they're like, well, we're going to make this fucking movie. And it's like
sunken costs. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Gale and Zemeckis had nothing to do with the making of the movie really, but it got made because of them, which I thought was kind of hilarious. But like Zemeckis, since then, like if you look at Back to the Future, like it's just such a finely made film. There's no like real thread to pull to unravel the brain behind it, and it all works. The one thing I would say, they even play with the whole butterfly effect thing too, with the bulletproof vest and stuff like that, where they're like, oh, you can't mess with things, but then they start to mess with things, certain things that do help them, little things I think that are not the big things that we get in part 2 where they kind of fuck with everything. Where where Biff fucks everything with the almanac and stuff. Right. But yeah, so I mean, any other thoughts on part 1, guys? I know we kind of jump back and forth here, but anything you wanted to say on part 1?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the bigger reasons why it stood the test of time and people like it so much is just it's based on like such universal truths about like, the story being the Bob Gale wanted to know whether he would be friends with his dad. So it's like finding common ground with your parents, and you might not be so different. They were kids too at one point, so it's just an interesting concept that I feel like a lot of people can relate to. So I feel like that has really stood the test of time. Obviously, the soundtrack is amazing.
Yeah,
it's like an all-timer theme song, right? Like, it's recognizable.
Sure.
Even just a few notes, you're like, oh, I know exactly what it is. It's kind of like, I feel like it's kind of like Rocky, where they needed something that sounded really big, right? Because the original movie, I think people don't realize, I don't think it had a terribly big budget.
No, it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't huge. Yeah.
So I think they really wanted to leverage the main theme, the soundtrack, to really up the ante, and I feel like it did that.
19 million, and it made 388 million. So,
dang.
Yeah, part of their opening theme song may or may not appear in our opening theme song.
Part of it, yeah, a little bit, and then we also end with one of the lines as well. So.
It's funny that we're talking about this and less remarks about the opening movie, because the first time I watched it with Dawson, I'm like, did you love it? He's like, it was okay. He's like, so I just looked at him and goes, guess you're not ready for it, but your kids are going to love
it. Good one.
And he eye rolled so hard at me.
As they tended to. Well, that's what you're in for, Jeff. All right, so part 2. So obviously part 1, success. Like we said, they weren't sure if they were going to make another one. And then they decided they greenlight a sequel, and everybody's back with the exception we talked about already. Crispin Glover did not like the low amount of money he was going to be paid, and therefore did not come back, and they cast somebody who looks similar to him. They put a lot of makeup on him to make him look like Crispin Glover, and he started to sound like Crispin Glover. So that was a whole lawsuit in itself and stuff. So part 2 and 3, they made together. We mentioned that already. And like I said, one thing I liked, definitely rewatching part 2, was seeing those little threads 2, 3 throughout part 2. I liked how they kind of worked everything together. Part 2 is has a little bit more of a downer ending. Like, it's one of those things I could see it, like seeing it in theaters. I'm not going to compare it to watching like Infinity War or something, because that was much more emotional. But I could see watching part 2 in theaters and being like, wait, that's how it ends? Like that's not an ending. But they do give you the trailer for part 3. What I gravitate to for part 2, what I remember is the future scenes and the hoverboards. Like, those are some of my biggest memories from being a kid, and the get up he had, the shiny hat and the vest, or the jacket that shrinks his size. Yeah. Just all the
self-drying jacket.
Yeah, the self-drying jacket. Obviously, the Chicago Cubs winning the World Series. Jaws 19, with the big 3D shark coming out of the billboard. Elijah Wood as a little kid playing.
Oh my God! Yeah, he's
baby games.
Kid. Yeah,
you got to use your hands. Baby games. Just so many things. And again, like we talk about Thomas F. Wilson, a future, Biff's grandson. Fantastic. Just a really great performance from him. And just super cool. And it I forgot some of the, hadn't that seen in a while. I forgot how, they go to the future and then they go back to the past when it's all fucked up with Biff because he stole the almanac and goes back in time to 1955.
Timeline skewed.
Yeah.
I remember there was a Big Bang episode arguing all about this, and however, if they go back and that, I'm like, just watch the movie.
I think, you know what? I'm sure you could pick it apart, but I think for the most part, they did a pretty good job of piecing it together, so it doesn't seem like overly ridiculous at any point in time, aside from the fact that you're watching a time travel movie.
I think they also just wanted the sci-fi to be really accessible too, right? Like, they didn't want to go like they didn't want to make Interstellar, right? Or it's
Yeah.
like talking about wormholes and being super, scientifically accurate. It's just like, look, man, this is a movie about time travel and it's kind of fun. So just eat your popcorn and shut up.
I especially love in the second one, Principal Strickland, James Tolkien.
Yes. Yep.
Mhm.
He's just strapped with like a bandolier and a
Oh
shotgun.
my God.
And
Yeah.
Slackers!
Eat lead, slackers.
It's so when they get back to the alternate 1985, I think that's a great kind of setup. The scene too with Thomas F. Wilson as older Biff, and he's just, when I was younger, I was told that a kid and an old man would come looking for this. Yeah. I just didn't think it'd be you. And he pulls the gun. Like it's just such a great moment. Mm-hmm. The whole Billy Zane, of course, as we talked about earlier. Much bigger role this time around. Congrats, Billy.
How about Elizabeth Shue?
Elizabeth Shue replacing the original Jennifer. So the one other thing I'll make about it, I thought it was kind of odd to bring. I know why they brought her, because they had stuff that they had to do with them in the future. But then when we get back to the past, they're like, yeah, she'll sleep it off, and then we never see her again. I think till the end of part 3, we never see her again. Yeah. And I thought
asleep in some random
until they fix it, and then it's her house again.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I get it is kind of weird that she's not in the third one, but then if they would have really shoehorned her into
and I think the only reason it probably wouldn't have felt as bad in part 2 had it been the original actress, because it was it's like, okay, so they thought this role was important enough to recast it because the other girl wouldn't return, and yet they still do basically absolutely nothing with the character.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the story goes they were kind of in a bind, right? Because the way the first movie ended, she was in the car with them.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So had they known that they were going to make more, they probably wouldn't have had her. So they kind of had to do some mental.
Which they also reshot that ending too with her.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting. I was like, I didn't remember. I was like, oh yeah, I guess they did do that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this one, like I said, this one to me is always kind of stuck out as my favorite. I don't know if it's just, like I said, the cool hoverboards, the hey McFly, those ones don't work on water.
You need more power.
So if we're gonna be nitpicking stuff, so he's not exactly like in the middle of the ocean.
No.
So I mean, and he has a self-drying jacket on, right? So just jump off, man. It's fine.
Which is what he ends up doing anyway. He ends up having to jump off.
So
the same thought. I watched it. I'm like, why didn't he just jump down and walk over? Why is he just stuck?
Maybe there's piranhas in there or something that we don't know about.
It was I will say he did not know it was a self-drying jacket at that point, though, because it wasn't after that moment when he gets out that it self-dries. But I was at the same moment, like you said, little nitpicks. I was like, and he wasn't that far from the ledge. I feel like he could have jumped it.
He probably could have done it and not even got wet. Yeah, you're right.
But obviously, if he doesn't do that, then we don't have the hit swinging for the baseball bat, them running into the courthouse, and then getting arrested. And it's one of those things. I think that just had to be there so they could set up that plot point.
Yeah. Who am I to question Bob Zemeckis, really? Who am I to question him? So.
Yeah, that's true. He's a legend. When they go, and like you already talked about, it alluded to, the whole idea of basically kind of redoing part of the first movie, but having to reshoot it differently, I thought was really cool. And I thought I liked all the wide angles of him watching the things happening. I thought that was really cool.
I think he just stole his wallet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh la la. Ooh la la.
That was good.
Was that something kids did back then? They just hung out outside the dance and looked at porn?
I guess. I mean,
and I think to your point too, Jeff, where they were, kind of picking apart things that were done back then. I think that was another thing. they, instead of making 1950s kids look like how they did in like Rebel Without a Cause, they made what 1950s kids were really like, which, you know, I think people tend to look at like those old Westerns in the 50s and 40s that didn't have any violence or any like, and they didn't swear. I remember when Deadwood came out and Schweringer was saying cocksucker all the time. Well, they didn't speak like that. I'm like, they didn't speak like that in the 1940s and 50s movies you watch. I guarantee you cowboys in real life probably spoke like that. It's like, we base our history on like the TV, like, you know, watching the Waltons or
Gunsmoke.
Right, exactly. Like as if that's actual history. Like, no, that's television history. That's that's what people were watching back then. And then in the 70s and 80s that changed. You know, they started.
Yeah, if I had to worry about cholera, I'd probably be swearing and
yeah, right. Exactly. Like, I just think about a bunch of grown men who are doing prostitutes in the middle of an old West town and they're not cursing. Like, I mean, like,
yeah.
It was one of those things to me. Like and so I think like they probably like, I'm sure Zemeckis, because he was a younger person at that time. I don't know when he was born, but he probably knew kids that spoke like that, or, you know, and looked at nudie magazines back in the 1950s and 60s and stuff. So it's just something you didn't see out of kids like in that time in other mediums. So I thought that was another interesting, just the way they kind of positioned all that stuff. So I think, like I said, I think a lot of work went into making this movie work just as well as the first one, because they didn't want to just do a sequel, repeat themselves, and be like, here's a fucking movie again. They wanted to create something different, and I thought that was really cool. So, and
at the same time, they have, you know, throughout all three movies, there are you know, repeating moments and stuff, but like they make the movies themselves different enough, you know, into like going to the future and then to the quote present and then into the past to get back to the you know, and then 3 being the old West. But like throughout the movies, there's all these different repeating moments, you know, like the manure and stuff like that, where it kind of ties it all together. So it's the history repeating itself, but the movies aren't exactly all 3 the same.
They're not. Yes. So we've talked about this before, Wayne and I. Like, what was great about the 80s and even like maybe like the early 90s, they were making sequels. They didn't have the mentality of, well, we just want what we just made, because that made a lot of money. It was, oh, okay, well, Robert Zemeckis made a great movie. We'll just let him do what he thinks is best for the sequel and the follow-up. And we don't get that anymore. I always point to Bill and Ted. The fact that Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure goes from them time traveling to them going through hell to get back to Earth, like, is a complete like 180 on what kind of movie you're making. But they did it because they were allowed, they had success. And I feel like that's the one thing I miss out of like movies, like taking more risks. We had a buddy of ours come on and talk Gremlins 2. Same thing. Completely different fucking movie than the first movie. Just like really, really weird, bizarre Looney Tunes live action style movie. And you can't do that today. Like, there's just no way. So I credit them for being able to be like, hey, you know, I know what I'm doing. Let me just do what I want. And Toby Hooper's another one I always point to with Chainsaw, where he's like, I'm going to make the second one a comedy. And they're like, what? So, like, sorry, Wayne, you were going to say something?
I always go back to the Hangover movies. Loved the first one. I didn't need 2 identical, or not really identical, but
the first
recast.
And he even said that the second one is basically a remake of the first one. That was kind of his intention, I guess. It just didn't work as well. The third Hangover movie I thought was different enough. The problem was it wasn't funny enough. Like, it was definitely, the story was definitely different, but it was just not funny, I thought.
Right. Yeah, and kind of the same thing with like Force Awakens too. It's basically like A New Hope too, right? Like, I enjoyed, you know, I'm not the biggest Star Wars guy, but like I really enjoyed Force Awakens, but I was like, that was New Hope too. That was kind of cool, I guess.
Yeah, right, exactly. That was balancing, when you're doing something like that, you're balancing the nostalgia, but also trying to give something new, which we're always going to disagree with this, Wayne, which is why I like Last Jedi more of that series, because at least Last Jedi tried to do something different. People may not have liked it. It's fine. It is what it is. This is not a Star Wars conversation. We're not going to get into it. I'm not going to make you angry again.
Wayne looks like he's on your side on this one.
If it would have been a fine movie if it wasn't Star Wars. So
Star Wars. Yeah. That's how I feel about
interesting take.
Yeah. Well, because he does not like any of those movies, so that's.
I like The Force Awakens, and I don't care for Last Jedi, and the Rise of Skywalker is just a mess. So.
Well, Rise of Skywalker is just like they were like, well, even though critics like this last movie and it made a lot of money, JJ, you need to fix what
people are pissed.
Yeah, people were pissed. So make the fans happy, and then they introduced this storyline that just makes no sense. Again, not a Star Wars podcast. We'll get into that some other day. But yeah, so I think just having the balls to make something different back then was great. And just again, now as we get into part 3, the Western, it was obvious that they wanted to make a Western. Like that was their goal with coming back to do part 2 and part 3. And goddamn, does it fucking work, man? I mean, they do a really good job of setting up from part 2 to part 3 in the beginning. You have Doc from 1955 helping Marty get back to 1885 to go rescue Doc, which they will argue that the whole will save him from being killed by Mad Dog. That's really all he's going. Right. He's thinking he's going to bring him back to the future, but yeah, it's a really cool setup, I think, and of course the fact that he goes by Clint Eastwood too, I thought was funny.
Mr. Eastwood,
yeah, yes, and the Irish accents.
Oh, that was good.
He's good with the accent. But it I just thought it worked. I thought the third one was, if you like westerns, I mean it's a western, it's just a western with time travel in it. But I thought it worked really well. What are your guys' thoughts on part 3?
I love part 3. So Jeff, go ahead, please.
I think 3 works really well. Kind of what we were just saying, how they made all 3 movies different enough where the third one they really wanted to focus on Doc, right? And because he was kind of, not that he was like this side character at all, but they didn't really focus too much on him like personally. Mm-hmm. So then introducing the love interest really gives them the opportunity to dive into that. And Marty almost doesn't take a back seat, but it's definitely a much bigger Doc movie in the third one.
It is. Well, and I think you look at part 1 and part 2, I mean, every problem that occurs is with Marty's family. Right. And it's wanting to fix something in the future in part 2 for Marty's family. It's going back and fixing something in the past for Marty's family. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that I think needed to be focused on. Like you said, not that Doc was a side character, but this is truly his story. He wanted to kind of live like this old West lifestyle. And Christopher Lloyd is great. I mean, I don't know if we really mentioned it enough, but Christopher Lloyd's fantastic in all 3 of these films. Mm-hmm. And it was fun to see him kind of be able to carry this one a little more than he did in the first 2. So, Wayne, what are your thoughts? I know you said you love the third one. What are your main things?
From the music playing at the fair, it gets stuck in my head, and I start humming it. The little wolfy, twangy thing they got going on there. It gets stuck. I'll watch the third one, and that music track will be stuck in my head for the next 3 days, and I just sitting there going, humming it to myself and whatnot, and just. I loved how they tie everything together with the reason he goes back to 1885 is because Doc is killed. Mm-hmm. Clara Clayton, Miss Clayton, whatever.
Miss Clara.
Yeah. She is supposed to, perish when her wagon or her wagon gets spooked. They fix that, and the ravine gets renamed, and and I think just the finality of the end of the time machine, the end of the DeLorean, and just that final we're done now. So.
Yeah,
I just appreciated that. And all of a sudden, you're all like, oh, well, Doc, and then they show up, and you get the warm little fuzzies, and these are our boys, Jules and Vern.
Yeah. Yeah, and, him giving him the picture, that's a really,
Your
really
future isn't
moment.
written yet, so do your best to make it a good one, or whatever the actual code is.
Yeah. It's tremendous.
I think I put that in the yearbooks one year in high school just because, I was so, with it
and and I do, this is probably the one I've seen the most because it was on TV so much back in the early 90s. Mm-hmm. When I was watching just constant HBO, Cinemax, and all that stuff. So I definitely agree. I actually remember a party in college where I stayed at a buddy's house, and I woke up and it was fucking on TV. I'm like, fucking this fucking movie, man. I can't,
You can't escape it.
I can't escape it. It's been around for as long as I can remember. Going on, what are we, 32 years now? So it, yeah, I mean, that's what I think is nice about all these movies is you could pick something, I think, out of all three of them that you really like, and they're all very enjoyable. And it just really, while we've had lots of great time travel movies, I think since, nothing has really been attempted to do something like this, where they make an entire franchise out of the time travel. And I thought that was just, I think that's something that we may never see. I don't know, because it took, you could tell, again, very meticulous by Gale and Zemeckis to make this franchise. So
it's a lot of work to keep all your ducks in a row especially when you throw in time travel and butterfly effect and lead. Yeah, it's just like
so much.
It's a lot of work. I don't think people are willing to put the work in that Zemeckis did, because it's just, they're like, yeah, no, that's
yeah.
And then he did it right the first time, so
right, exactly. Why mess with it?
And then there's just the quotability. I mean, how many times were we at the office?
Yeah.
And, I'm guilty of this probably way too much. Ronald Reagan, the actor? Because break up the monotony, if you will.
Which, if you listen to our audio at the end of our show, that part that is in there. Yeah, I mean, just these movies are, like you said, endlessly quotable and just fantastic. Jeff, do you have any time travel movies that you would recommend outside of the Back to the Future films?
Yeah, definitely. So let me ask you guys this: Do you consider time travel movies also movies that are time loops?
I have a list that has both time travel and time loop movies. I separated the time loop ones on here, but I still count them though.
Okay, fair enough. I just wanted to see what your guys' feeling was. Like, do time loops, are they considered time travel?
I think so.
It's like a one in
the
a
lack of
1A
travel, the being stuck aspect of it.
Yeah,
right. So as far as time travel movies, we mentioned Endgame. You obviously, that's kind of the pinnacle, right, of the superhero movies, and time they added the time travel aspect, which kind of felt like they were cheating a little bit, but it's still obviously, Endgame is tremendous. I really loved Looper.
Yep, same
Looper
here.
was awesome.
Looper's really good.
Speaking of Rian Johnson, have you guys ever seen a movie called Time Crimes?
I have not yet. I know I need to watch it. I just have not watched it. I heard
it's weird, man. Yeah. It's really good. I think it's Spanish.
Yeah, it's Nacho Vela something.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. It's really weird, but it's good. I enjoyed that. I watched it years ago, but just looking back at time travel movies, this came up. I was like, oh yeah, I've seen that one before. It's pretty good. This indie movie called Safety Not Guaranteed.
One of my favorites.
It's really good. Really good. That's, the guy who did the new
Colin Trevorrow. Yeah, did Jurassic World. Yeah.
I feel like this was I don't know if it was his first one, but it was one of the,
It was. I believe it was his first feature film. Yeah, starring Aubrey Plaza, Mark Duplass. Great cast, great film, great little indie film. Similar to what we're going to talk about too today, Wayne. I think more is Meet Cute kind of fits more of, I think, an indie style film than it does a big box office.
Yeah, it's definitely an indie film. About this weird eccentric guy who puts an ad in the paper about he needs help with time traveling. And, it's really good. I definitely recommend it. Obviously the Terminator movies, that goes without saying.
Yes, I wrote down Terminator, T2, and then Dark Fate. Those are probably my three. Obviously the first two, and then I actually like Dark Fate, which was the last one.
Yeah, you know what? I actually rewatched that one maybe a couple weeks ago, a month ago. And when I put it on, I was like, oh man, I wish this movie was better. And then when I finished watching it, I was like, it was better than I remembered.
Yeah.
It was pretty good. It's obviously the third out of those three, but
for sure.
The others are way distant 4, 5, 6 or whatever. So,
yes, agreed.
And I really, really wanted to like Salvation. Was it the one that actually was in the war?
Yep.
I was like, finally, they're doing the war. It's going to be so good, and then it sucked.
Yeah,
it was
arguably the only one without actual time travel in it either.
Right? Yeah, not enough.
It's implied.
And then I don't know if you would consider this movie time travel, but Arrival. has like time travel elements.
I didn't write that one down. That was on a couple lists. It's almost like a time loop almost. I don't know, because it's like little bit of it. I almost looked at it as like,
it's not even like a huge part. I mean, it's very important to the movie, but it's like it kind of like gets thrown in at the end.
Yes. I felt more it was like telekinesis kind of more than time travel. Like she got to see what was going to happen.
Something. Yeah, it's weird.
But great movie though.
Yeah, no, it's excellent. And I love that director. He's one of my favorite directors. Yeah. Prisoners is in my like top
Prisoners is great.
15. That movie is tremendous. And then for Time Loop, Edge of Tomorrow is awesome. Mm-hmm. Is so good. And then these movies, not necessarily time travel movies, but Christopher Nolan is really known to like focus on time. Mm-hmm. He's just obsessed with time, right?
Yep.
So like, I mean, Tenet technically is time travel.
Yeah, Tenet is time. Tenet for sure
is time travel. Yep. That's his most like, explicit time travel movie. But, Inception, Memento, Dunkirk, Interstellar all deal with time in different ways, which I think you can tell he's just really obsessed with the idea of time and time passing and manipulating time.
I mean, Dunkirk, part of the score is basically a ticking clock, like the entire fucking movie.
Yeah, and like Inception being like time instead of like horizontal, it's vertical, up and down, that kind of idea. And Memento working backwards, telling a story backwards, but in doing so tells a different story forwards. Like very, very weird. And Interstellar, the idea of time moving differently on different planets.
And it does involve some sort of like time travel-ish stuff at the end of the movie.
Going through the black hole, and then once you get to the part where he's like behind the bookcase, it kind of goes off the rails a little bit, but apparently, according to scientists, it like kind of makes sense. So whatever, I'll just have to take the word for it. But,
I feel like Christopher Nolan has traveled through time.
He probably has.
I mean, if we're going to talk about that, I mean, I think we need to touch on The Simpsons and their ability to see in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, very true, very true.
I can see through time. So that's the kind of the list that I put together. I'm sure there's a million more, but those are the ones that I really enjoy.
Here's the ones that I wrote down. About Time, which Wayne and I have talked about on the show before.
One of my favorites of all time, yes.
Source Code with Jake Gyllenhaal. I like that one. Also with Jake Gyllenhaal, Donnie Darko. Not fully time travel, but at the end of the movie, there's some time travel in it.
Yeah, kind of like Arrival,
Yeah, exactly. Two other superhero movies, X-Men Days of Future Past and Deadpool 2.
Oh, that's a great one.
Yeah, both of those, I think, really handled it very well. I thought Deadpool 2, of course, answers the age-old question, would you be able to go back in time and kill Hitler? I thought that was a great extra scene in the credits, if you haven't seen that. Predestination with Ethan Hawke is a very interesting one. Army of Darkness, one of my fucking favorite horror comedies. I mean, it's all about time travel. Bill and Ted 1 and 3. Planet of the Apes, the original films, and even like the Mark Wahlberg one deal with time travel. I would say when I say Planet of the Apes, I'm mainly talking about the original 1960s film, because the new ones don't deal with time travel at all. 12 Monkeys. Yeah, they are fantastic. They're a much better franchise, just those three movies, but I'm just saying time travel specifically. 12 Monkeys for sure. In the Shadow of the Moon, I wanted to bring up, and See You Yesterday, both Netflix originals. Don't know that many people know about them. Very good time travel films. One of them, In the Shadow of the Moon, is about stopping a serial killer time traveler. And the See You Yesterday is kind of a time loop, time travel one. She keeps going back to the same point to stop her uncle from being shot by the police. So it's very much a modern day time travel story. Very good film. And then, of course, we talked about something that this movie is based on, The Butterfly Effect. Ashton Kutcher's The Butterfly Effect. I thought it was a pretty good like horror science fiction film. Time loop movies, I wrote down Happy Death Day 1 and 2, Groundhog's Day. One of the first movies that we reviewed on this podcast, Palm Springs, which is really good on Hulu. Russian Doll, which is a TV show on Netflix with Natasha Lyonne. Really very good. Boss Level from Joe Carnahan is on Hulu with Frank Grillo, where he's basically it's almost like a video game. Every time he dies, he goes back to the same point. So it's kind of like an Edge of Tomorrow, but it's more scaled down. But I thought that was really good. The Map of Tiny Perfect Things is like a romantic drama that has to deal with time travel, which I thought was interesting. or time loops. Endless, which is like a sci-fi horror film about like a cult, really good. And then Run Lola Run, which The Simpsons did, with a Run Lisa Run. Another one where it's just like that one's more. It's a time loop because she keeps it's like until she gets it right, it's not going to stop type of thing. Kind of like Happy Death Day and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's what I would say. Wayne, any that we left off that you wanted to mention?
Are there any left that we didn't talk about just now?
I don't think so.
We named quite a few, yes.
Yes, indeed.
All right. So next is our review
of the week.
That was
kind of trying to connect with the Great Scott. But
yes.
Yeah, that kind of failed there a little bit.
Yeah, it's okay. I got it. All right. So our review of the week is Meet Cute. It is directed by Alex Lehman, written by Noga Purnelli, produced by Kiva Goldsman, starring Kaylee Cuoco and Pete Davidson. Those are basically the main two people in the plot. In the plot of the film, there's one other person. So let me go back because I want to make sure we give everybody credit here. There's a third main character that we see quite a bit, and that is
S. Craig.
Yeah, Deborah S. Craig. Yeah, she plays June. Oh, and Kevin Corrigan too from The Departed. He plays the bartender. So we have here a time travel romantic drama, essentially, Jeff. It's a film. It basically starts right, like it doesn't give you any. The explanations are given throughout the movie of why what's happening is happening, even though they don't explain exactly how it works. But Kaylee Cuoco's character gives like this explanation, and then like 15 minutes later she'll be like, actually I left a part out, and then she'll go and she'll tell you exactly what happened. So there's a movie, Sheila and Gary are the two main characters. So Sheila has been meeting Gary for a week when we meet her. It's been about 7 days, and she is trying to, like, she's falling in love with him, and it's Meet Cute, for anyone that doesn't know, is what they call in a rom-com when the two lead couple, they have their meet cute, they meet for the first time.
And it's adorable. I love this because obviously, one of my favorite movies is The Holiday, and they discuss what a meet cute is during one of the scenes. I was like, oh, all right, great.
So this film works in the sense of like, you kind of just have to agree that time travel is happening. And Pete Davidson's character every day is being told that at the end of the date, she basically gets into it like, hey, I'm a time traveler. This is what's happening. And it's not till she reveals later in the movie, like, because things, after about a year in the relationship, she's reliving the same day over and over again. Things get stale. So then she does reveal that she originally tells him that you can only go 24 hours to the day before. That's it. Well, it turns out that you could actually go 24 hours anywhere in time. So she could travel wherever she wants. She just has to think about it. So she ends up fucking with him and like introducing things into his life as a child that then make him a different person as he gets older. And so when he finds out about that,
what could go wrong?
Yeah, right. Exactly. So what I like about this movie is it follows like the setup of a regular romantic comedy drama / drama, but in an unconventional way, obviously. And I think they're both really good together. I like Pete Davidson. I know people get annoyed with him because he's in the spotlight all the time and stuff like that. Unfortunately, a lot of that is some of the stuff that he can't control himself. But as an actor, just taking him strictly as an actor, I think he's actually pretty talented. I haven't seen him in a movie where I was like, oh, he's really bad in it. Even if it's just he's playing a version of himself, I think he plays that version very well, and it suits the movie very well. And in this case, this movie is about suicide at certain times. So if that is a trigger for anybody, we understand if you don't want to watch it, because there is this sense of kind of gloom hanging over Sheila's character played by Kaylee. So as Wayne said, it's more of a rom-dram than a rom-com, because it while it is funny at times, and you could tell obviously Pete Davidson improvising some lines and stuff, and there's some good moments, it is pretty dramatic, like I said, dealing with suicide and the fact that basically it starts because she was going to kill herself and she walked into the nail salon. It has a very safety not guaranteed feel to it, Jeff, because it's like she walks in this beauty salon. She's like, I'm gonna kill myself. I want to get my nails painted. And the woman, like, no, like, doesn't smile. She doesn't frown. She's like, I got like a time machine if you want to like try that out. And it's like, wait, what? Like, she just like walks her to the back, and you could tell, like, at first she's like not believing her, and she's like, I'll just try it out. And then like she travels back in time. So it's like this just kind of it's got a lot of quirkiness to it, which it's trying to, I think, have its, it's trying to be a rom-com, but also have the quirkiness of like an indie kind of movie as well. And I think it does work together. Yeah, I enjoyed this movie, Wayne, to an extent. It's not great by any stretch, but it's an entertaining film. And watching them work together, I think was good. Wayne, what were your thoughts on the film overall?
I like the little subtleties that they drop that play out and expand toward the end. I don't know how much we're talking about it, but
don't want to spoil anything per se, but they do definitely pull some threads of the characters. I think what's important is character development. And, you talk about that a lot in movies in general. And I think we even see, even though he's reliving the same day over and over again and he doesn't know it, his character still does. We still get to know his character. Just because of her frustrations, she starts taking it out on him, and we start to see who he really is.
And it's always good when you can just downplay vehicular homicide, over and over again.
So Jeff, this is not really a spoiler, but every time she goes back in time, she kills herself from the day before. She runs her over. She's like, "Yeah, I killed myself." He's like, "What?" He goes, "What about yourself?" She's like, "Yeah, I kill her. She's in the trunk of my car." And like, ha ha ha, like joking, but like the next time we see her, she's running herself over with the car.
So it's kind of like, isn't that? It's been a while since I watched it. It's kind of like Russian Doll, right? Where like every day.
Yeah, yes, it's definitely, the idea is similar to that. That you have to like know. I mean, they don't really explain it as such, but I guess you have to assume that that's what it is because she kills herself every time she sees herself. So it's definitely in that vein of like there can't be more than one of them type of thing. Right. But yeah, and it's funny too because like like we said, her character wants to die. So when she gets hit by the car, she's not usually like screaming. She's just kind of like apathetic, like, oh, okay. Like it's like, but they play. It's not like she wasn't acting. They play it really well, I thought. So yeah, I definitely think people should go see this movie because I think, or go see it. Watch it on Peacock because you can't go see it anywhere except your living room. It may be available to rent at some point at like Redbox because it is a Redbox produced film, but it is a Peacock original. I would say 7 out of 10. Maybe 6.5, 7, something like that. It's an enjoyable film. It's just something to put on. It's an hour and a half. Time flies, and I think you enjoy this movie if you just sit down and watch it and don't really think too much about it. So Wayne, I said about a 6.5, 7. What would your ranking be?
I'm right there at about a 6.5. Give me a chuckle, gave me some things to think about, but nothing I'm going to go out of my way to rewatch again anytime soon, if ever. But I applaud the effort. So
yeah, no, it was especially too because in this day and age, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, Jeff. Like, streaming services don't do a great job of promoting new movies. I mean, Kayla Cuoco is like a multiple Emmy-nominated actress, and Pete Davidson has been, because of the Kardashian thing, has been in the spotlight. And I don't think most people know about this movie. So, right. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it is weird that they don't, that like, Netflix, Hulu, maybe Prime does it a little bit, but like, they don't spend a ton of time advertising on like regular linear TV. Nope. So I think they just really like expect the what's the word? The
like the streaming audiences to pick it up on.
Yeah, but what's the term when they know exactly what you want to watch?
The algorithm.
The algorithm. Yes, I knew it started with an A. Yes. They just kind of like rely on the algorithm to like do the heavy lifting for them. I feel like,
dude, the algorithm
seems to have worked just fine. So
apparently, dude, it's so weird. Me and my buddy Andy were talking about it recently, and like, it's so strange. Like, if you watch a movie with an actor and then they're a smaller part in another movie, you'll scroll past that poster, and all of a sudden that actor will be plastered on your screen. And you're like, what? But they're like in that movie for 5 fucking minutes. And it's like, I'm like, okay, like I guess, man. We watched The Devil in Ohio on Netflix, and the main actress has a small part in those To All the Boys I Love rom-com Netflix. P.S. To All the Boys I Love. And the trailer it played was with her character. I was like, what? Huh? Like, okay, I guess just because we watched that show, they think we want to see her now. I don't know.
Right.
It's just
that's interesting. I didn't even think of it like that. Yeah, that they would go that into that
dude,
minutia to
when
like
you
really.
so when you scroll through Netflix next time, think about the movies that you often watch on there and TV shows, and you'll start to notice like actors and directors that you've watched more of, and you're just like, oh, like that's weird that they're recommending that for me.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting how it works. All right, so that is our review of Meet Cute. You can watch that on Peacock. Jeff, do you have anything that you have watched recently that you would like people to go seek out and enjoy?
So I haven't been able to watch as much stuff as I'd like recently because of the baby, you know how that goes. But when Jen and I do have some time to watch stuff, we've been watching a lot of documentaries lately. We watched which ones did we watch? The one about, I mean, there's a million cult movies, but the one about the one in Salt Lake.
Yep. Yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
Oh God, what is it called?
It's something to pray or something like that.
Yes, Be Sweet, whatever the hell.
Yeah,
you guys know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Warren Jeffs.
That was pretty wild.
Yeah.
Then we watched the documentary about the kid whose dad was keeping him captive. He basically kidnapped his own son, and then the son killed him.
Yes.
I Just Killed My Father.
Yep. We watched that one too. Yep.
I Just Killed My Dad. That was really good.
That was really good.
Yeah,
I made the joke though that they spoiled it with the title. I was like, I know what happened.
I guess I rewatched Revenge of the Nerds last week. Not that I would recommend it or anything, but yeah, that was on.
Well, we watched Sins of Our Mother, which is another one of those murder documentary ones that just debuted on Netflix. That was pretty good too.
Yeah, I guess, and I didn't watch it recently, but one that really shook me was was Our Father. The one about the doctor,
that one.
Yeah, we watched. Yeah, Wayne and I talked about that when we watched that one. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, crazy. I was like fuming after watching that.
Yeah,
that's one of those documentaries where you watch when you just want to be mad. You know, kind of like Dear Zachary. Like if you just want to be pissed, just put that on. That'll do the trick.
I don't think I can watch that movie again because
the most hated man on the internet.
Which one?
That's the guy that started the revenge porn site.
Oh yeah, I've come across that, but I haven't watched it yet.
Oh, you want to talk about getting pissed off?
Yeah, the Our Father one, that was, and the fact that too that there was no like ending really, like nothing really happened. And
I know that's half the reason I was so pissed.
Yeah, you're just kind of like, wait, what?
Like, so then are we just collectively as a society like okay with this? Like, I don't know. It seems like something everyone would be like. As divided as we are, like, I feel like it's the one thing we could all come together and be like, hey, man, I don't know if you should be doing that. It doesn't sound like you should be
you would
be able
think,
to do that.
In this day and age, man, I don't know, man. It's just, there's so many, again, like I said before we started recording, I feel like ever since humans were created, we've been shit. So it's not surprising that we continue to be terrible. Yeah. So so a lot of murder stuff, a lot of documentary.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I need to like watch something not as much of a downer, but I feel like we kind of gravitate towards the true crime stuff.
Every time one comes out, my wife usually I start watching him about half an episode in because she starts him before I get out there. So
yeah.
It's just
the Manti Te'o one was really good.
Yeah, that was really good. We watched that one too. That was another one that kind of pissed her off. She's like, "Wait, what? Why are these people?"
You know, I'm also really into documentaries that are like an hour and a half or 2 hours now, instead of being like these 10-part things.
Yeah,
like the staircase. Like by like episode 7, I was like, all right.
I never finished that one. The one with the nuns, I never finished. Because it was the same thing. Like 3 episodes in, I was just like,
yeah,
I couldn't get into them.
Just like can't commit like anything. Like your time is, especially after having a kid, your time is just so precious. You're just like, oh my god, just please get to the end of this. Like 10 episodes. You're like, the last 3 could have been.
You're like, episode. I know he fucking did it. Just get to the end already. Yeah. So lately, like I watched a lot of what's his name? Why am I drawing a blank on his name? Vincent Price movies. So I watched another one of those, House of Wax, which I thought was really good. Speak No Evil on Shudder, which was interesting. And that's another one. It's not a documentary, but it pisses you off. Like the ending is not what you want it to be, and you're just kind of like fucking angry. And you're like, huh, that's interesting. But we haven't finished it. We only got one episode left. We've watched the Dahmer, Evan Peters playing Jeffrey Dahmer on Netflix that just dropped this week from Ryan Murphy. I wanted to talk a little bit about that just because, you know, there's this sense of like, do we need another true story serial killer thing?
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do. The answer is yes. I think, you know, this one does a good job of not, I mean, it's called Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story. They make him a monster. Like if you come out of this movie and you're like, you know what? He was just misunderstood. You've got your own problems that you need to go work out.
Yeah, it's on you.
It's not the Ted Bundy stuff where it's like, everyone, oh, he's so sexy, which first off, I disagree with. Ted Bundy was not an attractive man. Now, if you want to say...
He's charismatic.
He's charismatic. And if you want to put him up on a board with a bunch of other serial killers and say he's one of the more attractive ones, sure, I'll agree with you. But the caveat has to be he's one of the most attractive serial killers, not just human beings, because he wasn't, you know, that sexy. And of course, when you cast Zac Efron to play him, you're going to think he looks sexy because it's fucking Zac Efron. But this movie, Evan Peters is not a terrible looking person, but they do a good job of making Dahmer creepy.
Come on, everybody in the 80s is awful looking.
This is true. This is very true. It's a good point.
On the next Now Showing with Mike and Wayne, we rate the sexiest serial killer.
I think that's part of our After Dark, Wayne. We need to do that one. You'll be surprised at who's number one.
I didn't know you guys were clickbait.
Yeah, we're going to start working for BuzzFeed now.
We need those views and downloads.
So yeah, it's 10 episodes, which I think is a bit long, but what's nice about it, it kind of reminds me like the strategy of it is like kind of like The Wire, where it's except for it's per episode. Each episode is kind of something a little different, and they do touch on the victims a lot, which I think is very important. And some of the episodes are basically about like there's a couple episodes that are about a victim, and you basically get like their whole backstory before he ended up murdering them. It's also interesting too, because I think they're assuming that most people know Jeffrey Dahmer. So like it starts out, the first episode is like, if you're not into it, you're not going to make it through that episode, because he's like cutting people up, murdering people. Like they get right into it. The first episode, he gets caught. It's like, it's the end. And then they kind of go backwards through stories to tell you how and what he did. So it's definitely, if you like serial killer stuff, it's good. It's a little drawn out, like I said, but it's definitely worth watching. And I think Evan Peters does a really good fucking job and probably needs a lot of therapy right now.
It's kind of like what they did with did Ryan Murphy do the Versace one too? Was that him?
He did Versace. He did Nurse Ratched. He did the Clinton one recently.
From what I remember from the Versace, it like
OJ.
It started at the end and then went back to, or there was something weird with the chronology of it. I can't remember. Yeah. It's been so long since I've seen it, but that one was really good.
One that I just finished up was on HBO Max, The Case Against Adnan Syed.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you guys have seen that one. It's a
while ago.
Years old now, but
I don't know if
obviously his conviction was just overturned and vacated because of shocking corrupt police bullshit.
I was going to say that was the Serial guy, right? The very first episode of Serial,
Serial podcast that achieved national fame and sensation,
and pretty much launched podcasts.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Well, that specifically the murder podcast, yeah.
That and this one,
yeah.
Oh, I've got jokes.
Taking the internet by storm.
Yes.
More like a slow drizzle. But hey.
So I mean, as you can see, we like murder docs on this podcast.
Yeah, I wish I had more recommendations or stuff that I watched recently that wasn't like true crime, but it's kind of where we're at right now. Well,
and seriously, but if you have Netflix, I mean, there's like a new one every week. It's kind of ridiculous to the point where you're just like, and some of them too, like they're all good, but there's a certain point where I'm like, do I need to know about this case? Was this that important? I do recommend, Jeff. It's Blackbird on Apple Plus TV with Taron Egerton and Ray Liotta and Paul Walter Hauser. It's about a serial killer I never heard of from like Wisconsin, Illinois area, and it's really good. It's 6 episodes. Taron Egerton plays a guy who gets arrested for drug dealing and stuff, and he's given an out. And it's a true story. If you go to Wikipedia, basically the guy's page reads exactly like how they filmed the fucking TV show. And he is tasked with he gets a 10-year sentence, but they'll get rid of his entire sentence if he can convince the serial killer to give away where he buried the bodies. They basically just need more evidence to convict him.
Yeah.
Very intense show. 6 episodes, really good. Highly recommend that one if you're into the murder stuff, because it just Paul Walter Hauser is a great character actor doing great stuff that I think a lot of people aren't even really noticing. He played Richard Jewell in Clint Eastwood's Jewel, which I thought was also really good in. Anything else, Wayne, that you wanted to talk about that you watched? Or
House of the Dragon continues to be above my my hopes, which I hope continues. But now they're doing another big time jump and shift, so we'll see. Characters are changing.
Interesting.
I just hope there's nothing like Game of Thrones season 8. So.
Well, all right. Well, good. You have to keep me. I'll definitely binge it when it's over. I've been waiting for it. So,
look, excited to start the. Well, not really excited. Cautiously optimistic about the new Andor Star Wars series on Disney Plus. I don't know. I hear mixed bag, but you can't really listen to reviews, especially fan reviews, because it's so toxic.
As I said, critically, I think it's the highest rated of the shows so far. Critically.
Sure. Wayne, did you like Rogue One? I know you said you didn't like the newer ones. Did you like Rogue One?
Yes, Rogue One was fantastic.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. I'd say I like that better than the 3 new ones.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree it was their best recent film for sure.
Yeah, it was really good.
That's just the problem I have with Andor. It's like, well, I know what's going to happen to him, so
right. Yeah. Well, and I heard that there were similar issues with Obi-Wan. Is people are like, well, I know how it ends, so like, do I really like when they? And it wasn't that the character wasn't interesting. It's that anytime they put a character in peril, when you know when they're going to die, it becomes like, well, fuck, I know he's not going to die here. Like, so.
Well, that's what made Better Call Saul so good, right? Like,
yeah.
Because you didn't know the flash forward stuff, but you knew everything. Like,
you knew all the other stuff, yeah.
Up until Breaking Bad, you kind of sort of knew where he was going to end up. So that's why it was so. The writing was so good that even though you knew ultimately where he was going to be, you still were. Gilligan does such a good job of like making really monotonous stuff like super tense.
Yeah, you and I were talking about that before. Yeah, there's a lot of scenes where you're like, a guy's like counting change, and you're like, what the fuck? And it's like super intense.
Like that scene at the copy shop, where his brother like hits his head. That. Anyways, but that's just my love for Better Call Saul.
Yeah. All right. So news and notes for this week. Jason Eisner, director of Hobo with a Shotgun, just had his new movie Kids vs. Aliens picked up by RLJE and Shudder. Jeremy Allen White joins Fingernails Film over at Apple TV, which stars Jesse Buckley and Riz Ahmed. Inside Amy Schumer coming back after 6 years off the air. Paul Reiser and Bronson Pinchot also coming back for new Beverly Hills Cop film. Scanners TV series coming to HBO. Nick Frost and Lena Headey will star in serial killer thriller Savolta. Vince Gilligan's new TV show starring Better Call Saul actor Rhea Seehorn has been given a 2-season order at Apple TV already. Saoirse Ronan will star in director Steve McQueen's World War II epic Blitz for Apple Films and New Regency. New Cloverfield film on the way from director Babak Anvari and writer Joe Barton. The film will be released by Paramount and produced by original producer J.J. Abrams.
Really? I didn't hear about that.
Yeah, they just announced it. There's no word on if it's a sequel to the first one or just another that part of the anthology where all 3 films so far have no connection for the most part. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they go with that. Zach Lebowski and Adam B. Stein, directors of Freaks, will direct Final Destination 6 for HBO Max, and it is still being produced by Spider-Man director John Watts. Yeah, John Watts, a couple months ago, it was announced that he was going to, after he stepped away from the Fantastic Four movie, he's going to produce the next Final Destination film. And I guess the original producer is still involved. It's going to be something a bit different, they said, but it's going to follow the same Final Destination, rules and stuff, but it'll be done differently. I'm excited. I like that series for the most part. After the first one, they all kind of suck, but at least the deaths are really cool. So I'm excited to at least see if they take
the second one's not bad.
Second one's great because it's so gory and just like,
oh my god,
plate glass window falling on the kid, and so many. I love the second one. The rest of them are like a level of badness, but they're still fun to watch because the deaths are usually cool. Storm Reed will star in Nun 2. And let's see, release is coming up. 65 with Adam Driver, produced by Sam Raimi and written and directed by A Quiet Place writers Scott Beck and Brian Woods, hits theaters March 10th, 2023. Wednesday, the Addams Family spin-off TV show at Netflix from Tim Burton debuts on Netflix November 23rd over Thanksgiving break. Spirited, Will Ferrell and Ryan Reynolds' comedic take on A Christmas Carol, hits Apple TV November 18th. Fleischman is in Trouble series with Jesse Eisenberg, Claire Danes, and Lizzie Kaplan hits Hulu November 17th. Deaths this week, we only had one, and it just happened yesterday. It was Louise Fletcher, Oscar winner for Best Actress for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, passed away at the age of 88. We did review a movie of hers on here, Jeff, called Grizzly 2 Revenge, or The Revenge, or whatever. It was one of those movies that got made 30 years ago that never got finished, that or 40 years ago, I think, that also had George Clooney and Charlie Sheen and Laura Dern in it, and the very opening scene, and they all die.
40 years ago?
It was made at like the late 70s, early 80s. Yeah. It was.
You could tell it was a cinematic masterpiece.
It was one of the greatest uncovered gems of our lifetime. So yeah, that's the show for the week. Wayne, any final thoughts?
No, I just thank Jeff for taking time out of his busy schedule with the new little one and all to come talk about some of our favorite movie franchises.
Yeah. If there's anything that I will, hide myself in my bedroom to record a podcast about, it is Back to the Future. That is for sure. So.
Outstanding.
Well, we appreciate it, Jeff. Again, thank you for coming on to say what Wayne said, but we appreciate you taking the time. And we hope to have you on again to talk something else, maybe Christopher Nolan films in the future or something like that.
Yeah,
so we could,
that or Shawshank is
Shawshank. Yep,
I know, like that's kind of like oh wow, your favorite movie Shawshank. It's like, yeah, it is. It fucking is. All right.
It's a great fucking movie. That's how I feel about Good Will Hunting. Like I feel like not enough people talk about how that's one of the best movies ever written, and every time I watch it, I fall in love with it even more.
So you're telling me you just really love Boston, is what you're
I do. Huge Boston fan. Don't let anybody else know that. It's private. Even though it's going to be on this podcast. All right, everybody. That's another episode. Thank you for listening to Now Showing with Mike and Wayne.
Oh, Reagan, the actor?
Hasta la vista, baby.
Hey, everybody, we're all going to get laid.